Hey, it's Kasim with Solutions 8, and in this video I want to talk about the dangers of broad match keywords and what type of match types to use instead, depending on where you are in your process. So, got a couple of slides here, Death by PowerPoint. There's 4 different match types. There's broad match, which is, if you've never used Google before, this is probably what you're going to end up trying the very first time because Google actually defaults to broad match. And you can spot broad match because there's no... there are no additional symbols. There's no modification to the text, the syntax. So broad match looks just like this. Then there's something called broad match modified. And we're going to talk a little bit more about broad match modified because Google pretends that it doesn't exist in an interesting turn of fate. And then we've got phrase match and exact match. So broad match basically tells Google, hey, anybody that you think, kind of relates back to this keyword, even if they're not necessarily saying this exact thing, Google, I trust you. And if you think it's a fit, then we think it's a fit. Let's go with broad match. It's a dangerous place to be. I'm going to show you an example of that. Broad match modified protects you a little bit. What broad match modified does is say, hey, they have to be using these words, more or less, and Google still gets a little expansive, but we're telling them to please be a little more careful about who you send us. So as long as they're using these words, they don't necessarily have to be in this order. And you can use, the semantic architecture isn't completely off of the table. So, for instance, broad match modified, if I say business tax attorney and they say business tax lawyer, you might end up showing up for that too. I think that's a little less likely with modified, but it's possible. Phrase match, they actually have to say this thing. So they need to, with phrase match here, business tax attorney, they need to, now if they say best business tax attorney, you'll still show up. Because phrase match allows... as long as they say this thing, it doesn't matter what the context is. There can be more after, there can be more before, but they have to say this thing in this order. And then exact match is, I only want to bid on this exact thing. So if somebody were to say best business tax attorney and I'm only bidding on business tax attorney exact match, then I wouldn't necessarily show up. Now Google, in their infinite wisdom, has actually expanded exact match to be beyond exact match. So you'll notice that there are search terms that you pay for that are, expanded beyond what your exact match requires. To date, it hasn't been too aggressive for my tastes, but it is interesting that they allow themselves to make exact match not an exact match. So I want to talk a little bit about broad match, and the reason I want to do that is because if I've got a little dummy campaign opened up here, if you'll notice when you're building a new search campaign, Google actually defaults to broad match, which is fine, except that it's the worst thing that you could possibly do for your campaign. So what's even funnier than that is the fact that they're defaulting to broad match. They let you know that phrase and exact match exist, but they're not making broad match modified available to you. So if you didn't know that broad match modified was a possibility, it's not shown here in their key, which is really interesting. So I like broad match modified a lot for new campaigns because it allows you to safely run an exploratory campaign and kind of figure out what it is that people are really searching for. So what we tell people to do is start with broad match modified. Generally speaking, there might be business cases not to do this. And then as you identify the keywords and search terms that are performing for you, then you can segue those into phrase and exact match and do keyword sculpting the way that you choose to do it. I know there's a lot of different approaches, but I like starting with broad match modified in most cases, and then niching down, so to speak, into phrase and exact match. There are some campaigns, and I'd say it's probably 1 in 100, truly, where we've been able to throw down broad match keywords. It tends to work with brand campaigns specifically. We've got one affiliate campaign we're running right now where we're just bidding on the brand, and it's performing really well in terms of Google's expansive reach. So it's putting us right in front of exactly who we want to be in front of. But for the most part, what ends up happening with broad match is this. This is a broad match campaign that we ran, just testing how well Google was going to be able to match up broad. So you'll see the keywords here: PPC company, best PPC agency, Google Ads agency. Really straightforward. And then you'll see what they gave us. So for PPC marketing, we got G5 Search Marketing Inc. And I paid $12 for that. Here's another one. PPC calls for tech support. That cost me 15 bucks. Cybermark Tallahassee. None of our terms here. And yet we show up for this and we end up paying 14 bucks for it. McNeil PPC. Sort of same story where doesn't really have anything to do with anything. PPC manager responsibilities. This one I can understand. PPC company and PPC manager are basically analogous, and responsibilities should probably be on our negative keyword profile. Now that I've seen this. This one was hysterical to me though. The best online advertising site in the world. Like we've got. I can see where it came from algorithmically. Best online advertising, best PPC agency. Okay. But again, you can just see how dangerous Broadmatch gets. This was a test that we ran. It didn't even last a full day, and we spent $136 on it. So you've got to be really careful with Broadmatch phrases. I'd recommend starting. If you're in an exploratory campaign, you don't know what terms to target, and trying to figure out what it is that people are searching for. Start Broadmatch modified, and then you can narrow down. But I wouldn't go direct. I wouldn't go straight broad. There's been some education flying around, some courses, some people saying that Google's algorithm is so advanced that now it can intuit what it is that you want and need using broad only. I've actually seen a major thought leader say this recently. I haven't made it work myself. Maybe he's smarter than I am. Who knows? But we've got Broadmatch working for brand campaigns, sure. But for the most part, I'd stay away from Broadmatch because I think it's a dangerous place to be. I hope this was helpful. If you liked what I had to say, give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. I drop a video every single day. And if I get 1,000 subscribers, then I get to start going live, which should be pretty fun. And if you have any questions, hit me in the comments. Otherwise, I will catch you on the flippity flip. Thanks for watching.